are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my Foul Play February series. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today we are going to be learning about the time that siblings of sociopaths realized something was terribly wrong with them. And like I always tell you guys, killers start at some age. They all start somewhere, and so these are stories from siblings who basically knew one of the members of their family were very unstable. So if you are excited to hear about these, make sure to thumbs up. And by the way, I am posting every single day this month, so make sure you are subscribed. So now let's get into this story. So it is called 26 Siblings of Sociopaths Reveal the Moment When They Realized Something Was Seriously Wrong. Number 1. He knocked out our disabled father. My older brother isn't just a sociopath, he's a psychopath. Even my parents are surprised he isn't in jail for murder yet. He's been evil as long as I can remember. Beat us all to pulps as kids for imagined slights against him, and actually knocked my poor disabled dad out on occasion. He's been arrested a bunch of times, and even after the most recent time, a police officer called my mom a few days later and asked if they knew he may have some mental issues. He had weapons bought from China stopped at customs. She said yeah, she knew, but she doesn't believe anyone would have the balls to tell him that. The police officer agreed. His favorite pastime recently is walking the streets with a signal jammer while people are trying to make calls or using it outside the fire/police station. Finds it hilarious. He's a-hole. He was banned from a local grocery store for threatening a staff member for apparently looking at him. That's not even the tip of the iceberg of what that prick has done to our family. Okay, now this is another story. Number 2. He shot my dog to death. I have an elder brother who is a diagnosed sociopath, and he is serving a life sentence for his myriad crimes. No, I won't elaborate. I first realized he wasn't right in the head when I was 10. It was shortly after our father had died. It was him, me, my sister, and our mother. He was 17 and was the oldest of us 3 kids. After our father died, his already abusive tendencies dramatically increased, not only in frequency, but also intensity. One day, my mom, my sister, and I went to the grocery store, and when we returned, I couldn't find my dog. He usually greeted us at the door every time he got home, but not that day. I asked my brother if he'd seen my dog, and he said no. A couple of hours later, after searching everywhere I could think, my brother comes up to me and asks if I want to go out riding. I said sure. We got on our bikes, motorcycles, and started heading out to familiar trails out in the hills. Growing up in Death Valley, there's not much else to do but ride dirt bikes. Me on my dinky Honda 50 and him on his whatever it was, I don't remember. We reached a small ravine he'd never taken me to before and got off our bikes. I looked down following his stare, and there is my dog's body. He'd been shot. I looked at my brother and I immediately knew he'd killed my dog. The expression on his face, along with taking me right to the body, made it obvious. Being a 10-year-old kid, I started to cry and I asked him why. His response was when I first realized something was truly wrong in his head. He looked me right in the eyes and with a nearly blank expression on his face said, "He protected you from me. We can't have that now, can we?" He got back on his bike and rode home. The 3 of us dealt with him and somehow survived for another 3 years before the authorities finally listened to what my sister and I had been trying to tell he'd been doing to us. He's now securely warehoused exactly where he belongs, away from us, away from society. Number 3, she tried to get his leg amputated. When my grandfather was dying of diabetes in the hospital after having his leg amputated, she lied to him and tried to get him to have his other leg amputated so he would be forced to live at home with her. She would lock me out of the house at 8 years old for not eating dinner fast enough. She locked herself in the bathroom and threatened suicide because I switched majors without asking her permission. We don't talk anymore. Number 4, he wanted to bash my head in. My brother and I were eating French fries and he wanted some of mine. When I wouldn't give them to him, he tried to hit me in the back of the head with a cast iron skillet. If I hadn't hurt him, I would have been dead. Up until that point, I had always known he was a dick, fake crying to get mom and dad to punish me, stealing my shit and lying about it, and it wasn't until the moment when it really hit home. Number 5, he beat a rabbit to death with a shovel. My brother started throwing those metal toy tractors at me when he was 4 or 5. A few years later, he chased me around the house with knives. By the time he was in middle school, he was threatening me by pointing loaded guns at me. My dad had an arsenal in the basement, and he taught my brother how to use them all. I hadn't even started anything. He just got bored and decided to torture me. And I was left to babysit him because I was a few years older. I think what really clued me in was how he'd always kept a loaded gun in the living room in case a small animal came near the house. One time he shot a rabbit out the window and it didn't die, so he beat it to death with a shovel. My mom would get really defensive and yell at me if I suggested his behavior was sociopathic. It got really bad when I moved back home for a semester during college. I'd done something to piss him off apparently, or he was extra bored, and he decided to take some rope, tackle me to the ground, tie my hands and feet together, and throw me in a closet for hours. He only let me out because when my dad was on the way home from work, now he claims he doesn't remember doing it. I tried to tell my parents, but as usual, they said we both did stuff to provoke each other, and I probably did something to deserve it. I signed up for an on-campus apartment the next day and moved out of their house for good at the end of the summer. They guilt-tripped me for never visiting. I hate my brother. I'm terrified of him, and I resent my parents for letting that happen under their roof and never disciplining him. Number 6, she would dig her nails into me until she drew blood. My oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and we grew up fairly poor, so both parents were out of home, a lot working to give us the basics. Because of this, my older sister looked after us. My earliest memories involve me running through the kitchen in a diaper, feeling so scared, trying to get away from her. Anything and everything would set her off. If attention was not 100% on her, she would flip out, scratching, kicking, hair pulling. My parents were pretty oblivious to all this, or more, my dad was also unstable, BPD, who frequently went off meds, and my mom was too emotionally abused to do anything to help. She had to have presents on everyone else's birthday, had to have the same presents as everyone else on Christmas, or better ones. As I was 4 years younger, I was much smaller than her and easy to catch. From my toddler years to 16, I had crescent scars all over my arms and ankles because she would dig her nails into my skin, drawing blood. The very first time it clicked in my head that no one would ever help and she could manipulate her way out of everything is when she stabbed me in the shoulder with a pin. I was about 8 years old. She had yanked out a chunk of my hair, so I told her to F off. The look on her face was horrifying because she looked so happy, because my dad had been sleeping and woke up to me swearing, which was strictly not allowed. She knew I was going to get in trouble, so she grabbed the pin off the table and stabbed me, then yanked it back out. I ran upstairs to get away from my dad, which was a whole different scary experience, and he wouldn't believe that she had hurt me. I came downstairs a few hours later when he allowed it, with blood all over my shirt. My aunt was staying with us and saw it, pointed it out to my dad, and they still believed my sister hadn't done it. I gave up all hope for help after that. That turned into 8 years of her scarring any exposed skin, pulling out my hair, cornering me and screaming about how disgusting I was, taking every moment to remind me I was fat. She had been anorexic/bulimic most of her teen and adult life, throwing things at me, telling me men will only like me because they're chubby chasers, etc. I am more of an extrovert than most of my family, so I always have a lot of friends and boyfriends in elementary school, and then actual boyfriends in high school. When she went away to university, my mother thought it would be a great idea for me to visit her there, a whole weekend being alone in her dorm with her. She spent the first day reminding me how disgusting I was, then act all nice until the evening. She wanted me to watch West Side Story, I think. It's the one with the opening scene of the 2 gangs finger-snapping down the street. Me, being 16, thought it was funny, so I laughed. Wrong move. She started screaming, threw out all the food, cornered me, and let me know how no one in my life actually likes me, and they're all just putting up with me because they don't know any better. I'll only ever be in abusive relationships. I don't deserve anything better than that. I'll always be fat and disgusting, etc., etc. Then she kicked me out and made our mother pick me up a day early. Mid-year she was home, and in a rare moment of civility, she wanted to talk. She asked me how you're supposed to feel sorry for other people. As in, how do you feel empathy? She couldn't figure it out when her professors talked about it. I carefully got out of that conversation. Later that day, after she'd done her usual "you're fat and disgusting" rant, I decided to turn my back on her and not engage. She picked up a textbook and hit me as hard as she could over the head with it, yanked me by the back of my head and pushed me in the cupboards to let me know, you're not allowed to ignore me. I have not spoken to her since that day. I'm now 26 and she's 30. She's still living off my mother and has zero social skills. The last time I saw her, she had drank a bottle of wine on Christmas Eve, 2011, and she just laid on the living room floor for the day. She's pulled a knife on our other sister. She's been evicted for trashing apartments that are my mother's name, had so many pets die unexplainably, expects to be showered with gifts and attention by everyone around her. She will get angry if family are paying more attention to the children than to her. She still has to refer to our mother as Mummy, and in that high-pitched Mummy voice she can't hold any platonic relationship, has never had a romantic one, and still hates me viciously for being able to have relationships. I will not be surprised if she ends up killing someone. She's the spitting image of our father in personality. She lives in another province from me, is still in school, and my mother is smart enough to never let her know where I live. Those close to me know how she is, and know not to give any information. Number 7. She would pour harmful chemicals into the fishbowl. I realized my younger sister wasn't okay from a very early age because she would abuse our pets. It started off with things that my mother played off as being accidental because of her age, like pulling the cat's tail or pouring harmful things into all the fish bowls. Then it escalated to shaving the cats, cutting off their whiskers, and eventually things like me catching her bouncing on the cat until it pooped itself from the pressure. Then I think my mom finally gave her some attention when she cut the cat's ears off. She did other things too, like punching herself and scratching herself, pulling her own hair during tantrums. Kid's still not right, even now, in her teens. 9. She threw hot tea in my face. When she threw a cup of hot tea at my face because I refused to show her something on the computer, or the time when she yelled at me for over an hour because I was really sick and had thrown up all over the bathroom sink. The same bathroom she had just cleaned. I stopped speaking with her over 7 years ago. Number 10. She convinced my friends to bully me. My sister is a narcissist as well. I truly hate her. She has terrorized my life since I was born, convinced her friends to bully me while we were in school together, threw tantrums over everything I did, demanded that I give her my things just because she wanted them, ruined every special occasion for me, etc. I was so relieved when she moved out of the state I finally had a birthday that wasn't ruined. And she wasn't there to ruin my graduation from university. It's the first time in my life that I hadn't felt under constant attack. I'm hoping to continue having lower contact with her for the rest of my life because she's truly toxic. This will probably be hard for me though, because my mother has NPD as well. So I really don't get any support from my family when it comes to not interacting with my sister. I probably will have to cut out my entire family if I want to live a healthy life. Number 11, he said he'd kill me and plead insanity. My brothers always seemed different. When we were little, he made up this game called Joey and the Wimp, which was really just boys wrestling. But it wasn't just boys wrestling. It was all about power and control. He would have his forearm pressing down on my neck and would whisper things like, "Someday I'm going to kill you, and nobody will do anything about it because I'll plead insanity." He would also talk about how he would kill me in my sleep. I've woken up a few times and he was just standing there in the dark looking at me. Once my dad caught him in the middle of the night getting a kitchen knife when he was 6. At 16, he and his crazy buddy did a home invasion on me and my friend. I had to go to the hospital. He beat up our mother, he broke his arm, and I suspected he raped her because she had to sit on this donut thing for a while. Then he was going to stab me. I got chased a half-mile through the woods till he tripped and I got away. He was going to shoot my dad when he was 17. He said he borrowed the gun from a neighbor. I saw it. It was a .38. A couple friends talked him out of it. He has been on disability since he was maybe 20, I don't know. I stopped interacting with him when I went to college many years ago. To this day, I suspect he will come and try to make good on his desire to murder me, thinking he'll get off for insanity. It's been years, but even just the other night I had a dream he was trying to kill me. I don't like knowing that someday I will likely have to try to kill him in self-defense. Number 12. He threatened to stab a homeless man. The weirdest thing about my older brother was that he did not seem to realize when he was giving his plans away. He'd come home from a stint of homelessness and very kindly say, "Wow, cool headphones." And 2 nights later, after all the promises to turn his life around, he'd be gone, and so would my headphones. His sincere compliments became a pretty clear indicator of what he would steal later, so we'd all hide whatever he admired. It's almost like he himself had no idea that he was going to rob us until it was happening. He physically abused the whole family, and we basically understood that he was a piece of shit. Maybe one with poor social skills, maybe one who was incredibly self-centered, maybe one with no empathy, but to get a real answer, he would have had to see a professional, which he was unwilling to do. He was arrested for threatening to stab a homeless man. There was no evidence, no case, but my dad was going to get him a lawyer anyways, out of guilt for never being able to afford one for all of his prior arrests. This case was dropped, thankfully, and as soon as he was released, he gleefully told us all in the car that the charges had been accurate. He was proud of himself. I think that's when it hit my dad. For me, it was when he literally hit my dad repeatedly with a phone for trying to call the police. My dad refused to retaliate, just sat there, sobbing. Number 13. He threatened me with knives. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. My middle brother and I get along great. The oldest, not so much. When he was young, he used to run our brother's hand under hot water. Then he moved on to yelling at me, scarring me, threatening me with knives, and then he once tried to kill me. The moment I realized that he wasn't normal was when he told me, while holding a knife, that he didn't care if I lived or died. All of that ended years ago, and now he's apparently changed. He's apologized profusely for what he did when I was a kid. I'm still not sure if I believe it. Number 14. She gave me 3rd-degree burns. When she blindfolded me, she was 4 and led me through a burning pile of leaves. I had 3rd-degree burns in my feet for months. Once during that period, she got mad at me for something and jumped on top of my feet and slid down. Or maybe the time when she was around 6 or 7 and took all of my favorite shirts, threw them into a bathtub and poured a bottle of bleach all over them. She's 15 now, and I'm hoping I get out of the house before she does something big again. Number 15. She tried to kill our baby brother. She's 2 years older than me. She did stuff like, when I was 3, she convinced me to pile as many blankets as we could on our sleeping little brother until her mom got back. I'll never forget my mom's reaction when I excitedly told her about our hilarious prank. Luckily, he was okay. When I was about 7, darling little bro climbed up a tall evergreen tree on our property and was hanging on a branch. He wasn't sure how to get down, and I tried convincing him to hang on while I got our parents. My sister started shaking the tree and yelling, "Fall, fall, fall!" He fell, yelling all the way down, and landed flat on his back. My sister ran away, and my brother was unconscious for several of the most terrifying seconds of my life. Luckily, he looked around and was fine. I got back and was bewildered to find out my sister hadn't told anyone, since I thought she must have ran to ask for help. There were tons of things. She was horrible to us, most often to me because I'm a female, and enjoyed causing me as much suffering, helplessness, and anger as she could vent her own frustrations. But those are the only 2 times I look back and go, wow, she actually wanted to kill us. There were a ton of signs, no big realization until I had become haunted by random anger attacks over childhood injustices. like her forcing me to destroy my art as a kid, and my parents denying any wrongdoing on her end, but never allowing me any outlet for revenge because my mom was so scared of her and made me be submissive to her every demand. All the time. I had to walk out of a Zootopia showing today because I couldn't get it out of my head, and I was breathing heavily. The reason I would categorize her as a grade A psycho is because she would actually pretend to be nice and use lies and manipulation and had no guilt about any of this. I was about 16 when I finally refused to take the fall for something she did. Even though I thought about it, it took me a long time to see how evil she was. She was great at painting herself as a victim who just had to have me say I did it because I supposedly wouldn't get in as much trouble. Okay, so this is getting really long, and that is just very hard to stomach, to be quite honest. And I think that it's very true what we were talking about at the beginning, that all killers start somewhere, and these poor families have to deal with the fact that nobody would help them, nobody would believe them. And it wasn't even just about, their parents. The police didn't believe them. No one believed them until it was too late, or they just eventually had to leave. And that can be some of the hardest things as well, to just, leave the rest of your family with this monster and know there's nothing that they can do about it. And the parts about manipulation and lying and making you feel like they're an amazing person is so accurate. I mean, we all know Ted Bundy was one of the biggest, but the most attractive, charming, just best people in the world, until you see their bad side and suddenly you are completely terrified of all human beings forever. Because if one person can be so normal looking and are capable of such horrible things, then anyone is. So I'm going to stop there before this gets really depressing, but I'll leave the original post link down below if you want to continue it, and also if you want me to continue reading them, I can do it in another video for you. But I think just for today, let's leave it on that note. Not a very good note, but a creepy note nonetheless, and that's what you're here for, right? But we only have a few days left of Foul Play February, and so if you enjoyed it, I would love your support by thumbsing up and leaving a nice comment down below. Or don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.